Welcome, everybody, to The Next Level. My name is Brian Daniels. I'm with my lovely wife, Raven. We've got Josh Shaver with us here, and we have a very special guest with us here today. We got Mr. Walter Day. Walter, it's good to see you. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. I'm honored to be on your show. So thank you very much. And how long have you been doing this show?
We've actually been doing this show since April.
This show.
This show. We did this is a show that stemmed from an old show that we did called the Dragon Cast that had been going on for like almost 10 years. So
Really?
So yeah.
Oh, the Dragon Cast, because somehow you're connected to Dragon Con?
Not Dragon Con. No, it was a website called Dragon Blogger. That's why.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, it's an honor to have Walter Day on the show with us. You guys just celebrated the 41st anniversary of Twin Galaxies. Man, I can't believe it's been that long already. And we're glad to have you here on the show with us. And got the official referee of video games here. And Walter, let's get into this, man. So I want to talk about what made you want to get into the arcade business to begin with.
Well, I was an oil broker in Houston, Texas in 1980, and we were working on an actual reference book. It was called Days, named after me because I was the founder of it. Days, Who's Who in the Petroleum Industry. And the guy who's my investor and co-worker on it one night said, "Boy, I can't look at these biographies anymore. Looking oil executive biographies. I got to go play Space Invaders." My eyebrows went up because I'd never heard of Space Invaders. And I said, "What the heck is that?" So he took me to an arcade that night. And I walked in there, and it was Malibu Grand Prix. This is Houston, June 1980 or May 1980. Mm-hmm. And I fell in love with video games immediately. And I opened an arcade as an excuse to be able to play more video games.
Okay. That's a great excuse.
That's a wonderful excuse.
And at the age of 32 years old, I'd be up to 2 a.m. going head-to-head against a 16-year-old.
That's fantastic. I love it.
Did you have outside of Space Invaders, did you have a particular favorite arcade game that you played a lot more?
Well, I played a lot of Centipede and I played a lot of Pac-Man.
Oh, those are two great games.
But the one that is best at that I actually held the world record for a while was called Make Tracks by Williams Electronics.
Oh, really? Okay.
It was a paintbrush painting a maze.
Oh, that's really cool.
I have never heard of that.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard of that one. That's pretty.
That's awesome.
That's pretty fantastic. Now I know at Twin Galaxies, it's in Ottawa. It was in Ottawa, Iowa. Ottumwa. Sorry. And you guys had a string of like guys come in. Of course, Billy Mitchell. I know a lot of people know of Billy Mitchell. I've had the pleasure. Raven and I have had the pleasure of meeting Billy Mitchell when we met you, Walter, back in 2019 at Gen Con. And how I first got to know Walter, or first heard about Walter, was there was this documentary called The King of Kong, Fistful of Quarters. And I would imagine that maybe how a lot of other people that hadn't already maybe knew you at the time kind of got to know you from that as well. What was it like seeing the competitive arcade scene just really take off at that time? What was that like for you to experience that, especially having been at this mecca of an arcade that we all come to know?
Well, first of all, it was huge. Video game playing was huge. Mm-hmm. I mean, there were like probably 75,000 arcades in America. It could have been way more. I don't think anybody ever knew a number. And the thing that was interesting is that on the January 18th, 1982 edition of Time magazine had a video game cover story. Mm-hmm. And it was talking about the incredible burgeoning growth of the popularity of video games taking over the world, and how this newfangled technology is winning the hearts and minds of youth everywhere. But not only that, adults everywhere too.
Yes.
Like where Twin Galaxies is running, we have people who are in the 30s and 40s in three-piece businesses come in. Instead of eating a normal lunch, they come and play Pac-Man or Donkey Kong.
Right.
Very, very interesting. And but in that article was a feature box about a kid named Steve Jurassic, who I think was 16 years old. And he got like a 14-hour score on Defender on one quarter. And someone came up to me. Someone came up to me in the arcade and said, "I can beat that score in the magazine." I said, "What magazine?" And he pulled the magazine and showed me the story, and I didn't believe it could beat it because this clearly was a national phenomenon. This kid had done this quarter, this 15, 14 hours in one quarter. He says, "No, I can beat that." And so I allowed him. And that weekend, he went 24, 25 hours. I can't remember. It was either 24 million in 25 hours or it's 25 million in 24 hours. I can't remember which was this. But essentially, what was interesting, the phenomenon that developed out of that was that suddenly I called up the radio station and they got so intensely interested, they came over and started broadcasting live from it as the score got higher and higher all night.
Wow.
All at the newspaper. They came over and they started covering it. I called up the TV station. They came over and started covering it. But then it got really strange. I started getting phone calls from TV stations in St. Louis and Kansas City and Peoria, Illinois. It turned into a regional, if not a national story. In other words, I discovered that was a big deal. Man versus machine.
Yep.
Kids
firsthand.
These kids taking on these newfangled geniuses of computer stuff,
Yeah.
And so on Monday morning after the weekend was over, I called Williams Electronics and said, "Look what we did. Is this the new world record?" And they said, "We don't know. No one keeps track of the scores. We have no idea." And people call every single day wanting to know what the record is, but we don't know because there's nobody keeping track of the scores. So I was intrigued by that. So I called up that morning 7 manufacturers, including Universal and Exidy and Stern and Nintendo and Atari and Midway, and asked them all the same questions. And they said, "We don't know. No one keeps track of the scores." And then I called up Replay Magazine and Play Meter Magazine, the two co-op magazines of the video game era back then.
Right.
They both said, "We get called every day, but no one keeps track of the scores. We don't know."
Oh my God.
So I thought of that overnight. The next day, I called back all 9 of those phone numbers I called and told them, "We got a scoreboard here. We're keeping track of the scores." And through some miracle of divine fate, karma, all 9 said, no one challenged us. They all said, "This is incredible." They embraced us and said, "Okay, we're going to put your name and number right here at our front Rolodex. When people call, we're going to refer them to you." All 9 of them said this.
Oh my gosh. That's
Oh,
amazing.
wow.
It's your problem now.
It was written. It was written, and like you said, it was our problem now.
Yeah. And so it was. They made it so.
They asked me, "Well, who are you?" And off the top of my head, I said, "Oh, we're the Twin Galaxies National Scoreboard." Just right off the top of the head.
You just pulled that out
I
of
love
your
that.
head. Like,
I love that.
this is who we are. Yeah.
And I went back to playing Gorf, which was one of my favorite game that day.
I love Gorf. That's a really good one. Yeah, that's a good one.
Suddenly, 30 minutes later, one of the arcade attendants tapped me on the shoulder and said, "There's someone on the phone. And they're talking about a high score." So I went to the phone, and it was a kid named Casey Murphy from Goodlettsville, Tennessee, who right after I called Midway, they called up Midway and wanted to know what the record was on Galaga. And they said all excitedly, "Oh, wait, we have a number you can call now." And they called and asked for me. And I looked up on our board and saw that our night attendant had a high score on Galaga that was slightly higher than his. So I said in a very, very serious, solemn voice, I said, "You, sir, have the second highest score in the world."
Man, that's so
great.
awesome.
He got so excited. He said, "Oh, I can beat that. I can beat that." And the next day he called up with a higher score. So within a week, we were getting like, I don't know, I'm making numbers. All I know is that it exponentially grew. Within a week, we're getting 8, 10 phone calls, 10 phone calls. And within months, we're getting 30, 40 letters a day until eventually it started reaching, maybe it eventually got to 100. I've said that numerous times, but it became incalculable, but who knows for sure. But essentially, we became overnight the world's most famous arcade. We became the crossroads of the video game age. We became the Mecca. We became the hub city of video games.
That is just an amazing story.
Crazy,
Like, literally overnight.
That's crazy. And it's funny you mentioned Galaga. That's my favorite game, and I've even submitted scores before to various places and stuff. So that's really cool that you became basically like the godfather of scores, of stats, and things like that. And having people call, and I'm reading here, it says you guys were getting up to 50 to 75 phone calls a day. How did you guys manage that? Because I know
I would say that we didn't manage it. It was overwhelming. It was,
yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah.
It's something that no amount of intelligence could have calculated or created. It was completely the forces of nature. Just like a river will flow down through all the declivities, finding its way to the ocean. There was a big force of nature. It was the need of the times, and it just somehow decided to flow out through me and Twin Galaxies. And so it was larger than life, bigger than real. And well, what's interesting, and this is why it's a legitimate claim for Twin Galaxies being the historic birthplace of organized competitive esports. Well, first of all, be aware that we didn't invent video game playing. We didn't invent video games. We didn't invent video game competition, because in all 75,000 arcades, everybody was in an uproar, hysterically trying to be the top scorer on dozens and dozens of different games.
Right.
And when they get the high score, they'd be the high score on that game for that arcade.
Right.
Having no idea how they stood with the rest of the world. And then when the game got moved out, because games would get rotated because of financial needs, they go to a place where they start making more money when they're placed in a different location. The scores would be all wiped off, and there'd be no record of it. Or when the arcade closed, there'd be no record of it. So in other words, it was like drawing a line in water. All the accomplishments led to nothing and ended up being worth nothing. But when Twin Galaxies came into existence, they united all the arcades into a global esports arena, so that when you played under the correct rules, under the correct game settings, and followed the proper protocol for submissions and for verification, your score could be compared to every other person on the same game around the world submitting to Twin Galaxies, which led to the creation of rules, a rule book, standards of operation, also procedures, and leaderboards. And with that, we were able to crown the champions and recognize who the world champions were. This was the invention and the beginning of organized competitive esports, the first esports organization in history. And so essentially, thereby hangs the tale of Twin Galaxies. It's the original. There's a big bronze plaque, weighs about 225, 30 pounds, posted on the outside of the wall of the original building where Twin Galaxies. It says Twin Galaxies, the historic birthplace of organized competitive esports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm friends with a few people that have visited there, like Doc Mack. I know he's been there a few times. I've seen some pictures of him. He's the guy who owns Galloping Ghost Arcade in Illinois. But I want to ask about you, since you guys didn't really have. What was it like figuring out the rules and getting it down to okay?
Yeah.
Hold on a second. Okay, can you hear me now still?
Yes.
You can't hear background noise, can you?
A little bit.
It's not bothering the recording, is it? Okay, there we go.
You're good. But yeah, what was that like, getting the figuring out the rules and the getting it down to where these are the exact rules for each game? What was that process like? How to figure that out?
I had to rely on a huge board of experts. The players themselves, the players would know that the players would have the most wisdom about each game, and by pulling it all together from the players, we're able to develop the rule book.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. That's pretty cool.
By doing contests, we'd work out bugs, work out glitches, work out cheats, find out things you can do and can't do, and also begin to get a sense for what. But still, it was an interesting growth process, because at first we were relying on people photographing the final score on the screen and having an affidavit signed by the arcade owner and by witnesses. But that didn't work, and we found out pretty fast that didn't work, because the arcade owners, many arcades were going under financial duress And so they were hoping that having a world champion at their place would get attention to them, which it would, and bring attention and publicity, and be quick advertising to help bring more people in the door. So the arcade owners really couldn't be relied on because they had a vested interest in claiming a world record. And also, more and more people would be unmasked as being lying and cheating and stuff like that. Because later on, we had to do more contests in person live so that people performed in front of us under our authorized settings. And then eventually in the more modern era, they had to start sending in videotapes. And even then, videotapes could be falsified. So it was a very, very, very difficult thing. And to the very end, many scores eventually became unmasked as not being possible because people misled us. But part of that was my problem because I was so extremely trusting. I couldn't believe someone would lie about a video game score.
Right.
So almost like a pointless accomplishment.
Of course.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I can't even imagine like some of the things that people say that they come up with. I'm just like, I would never even have thought of that.
Yeah.
Well, did you ever get one that you were just like, no way? There's no way you got this score on this game.
Well, I think one 15-year-old kid claimed 22 million on Gore.
All right, kid.
Well, it's like I play that game enough. I know better. Like that's crazy, man. Like that's now I know you guys. I believe it was like in 1983. You guys started working with Guinness World Records.
That's right.
How did that relationship start? Did they reach out to you? Did you reach out to them? What was that about?
I kept petitioning them the publisher stuff, and they recognized video game scores. And they reviewed what I did, and they determined that what I did was reliable, and they trusted me personally. And they made an assistant editor in front of. I was called an assistant editor in charge of video game scores.
Oh, wow!
In 83, I did the first contest and submitted verified scores that were done in front of me, and it appeared in the 84 book. And so in the 84, 85, 86, and I think 87 books carried video game scores that came. The first 3 years came from my efforts, and then the fourth year came from the U.S. National Video Game Team because I retired for some years. The U.S. Video Game Team carried on.
Wow, I bet that's a very cool thing to have is like to get that recognition from Guinness.
Just to trust you like that, yeah.
Well, Guinness just gave me an award just on September 16th that recognized me as the father of eSports. That's what it said.
That's awesome.
Yep.
That's absolutely awesome.
I know later on I think I read 2008, they actually came out with their very first gamers edition of Guinness World Records that was pretty much inspired by you and your work and long time work in the video game.
Here's the story on that. Not too many people know the actual story, so here's the story.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
I convinced them. See, then in 86. They stopped at the end of 86. They stopped running scores, and they didn't run scores again because I thought it was too difficult and too questionable. And they didn't run scores again until I kept petitioning them around 2000 and 2001 and 2003. Finally, in 2006, they decided to do. I think it was either 2 pages or 4 pages on video games. And I think it had 87 different records. And I think I personally wrote the text for 80 of them, 80 of the records.
Oh, wow.
And so they came out, I think it was the 2006 edition with 4 pages. I think it was 87 records. And the text was written, I think, by about 80 of them personally, word for word.
Wow.
And when the book came out and I saw it, and also I got them to do a 2-page thing on pinball for the first time ever. And I think it was awesome. I don't think they ever did it again. But it was very successful. But the 4-page thing when it came out, I called up Craig Glenday, the editor-in-chief, who's still the editor-in-chief. He's the one who won the eSports Father Award on September 16th. And I said, look, this looks incredible. Why don't we take all my stuff and turn it into its whole own book, and you and I will co-publish it? And he said, that sounds really interesting. Let me talk to everybody, see what they think. And so he says, there's a lot of interest here. Then he called me back, there's a lot of interest here. And he said we could become partners on this and blah, blah, blah. And we supply the content, we would do the publishing and everything like that.
Uh-huh.
And so then he began to say that we had a focus group, and the focus group has determined that this should be more successful than the regular book. So we're really interested in this. And then later on, apparently what happened.
It's 8 o'clock.
Well, it's 8 o'clock. So, so what happened later on is I began to send them lots and lots of emails, specking out this idea and illustrating this idea and defining this idea, and we could do this, we could have this kind of layout, tons of stuff, which they embraced and loved. And then at some point, the business people there usurped them and said, we're not going to have him as our business partner. We don't do that. We're not going to share the profits with him. We'll pay him $1,000 just for his book. And so instead of me being their business partner, they wanted to pay me that. So, and they took the book and they went and published it, but Craig, and I was essentially not a part of it, except that Craig Glenday felt so indebted to me that they did 2 spreads on me and Twin Galaxies personally, right, in recognition of the fact that Twin Galaxies, me,
Right.
had inspired the creation of the book. So Craig Glenday knows that. He knows that Guinness kind of like ran away with the whole project, but that's okay. They did a good job. They did a better job than I would have done, I think. Anyway, who knows?
Well, yeah, I guess.
I've never really told the story before. I'm very friendly with Craig Glenday, and I don't call them on the carpet about it.
Well, we thank you for sharing that with us for sure.
Yeah, that's an interesting story that I would have never. I remember when that came out. Yeah, I thought it was cool.
You know, I don't think at any ill will about them. I actually think they did a commonsensical business decision, and that's it went, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. That's that's interesting. I never would have thought about that. I mean, that's I remember that when that first came out. I thought that was really cool seeing that at stores and stuff. And I do remember I do remember when Guinness did a few scores before they had the Gamers Edition come out. But yeah, that's a cool story. Thanks for sharing that with us, Walter. We appreciate that. Let's talk about let's divvy away from games for a minute. We want to talk about your piano career.
Absolutely, we do.
Yeah,
tell us about this ragtime piano career. You were doing this like
the ragtime piano career from 73 up to 83. I used to be able to play 38 different piano rigs, completely professional, exactly like you hear on the records. I think
that's awesome.
To get performances. I loved it. And I regret the fact that I let it all fall to the wayside and I can't play any of the songs anymore.
Oh man, that's cool though. I always have a lot of respect for people who do music and things like that, and to be able to play that, especially ragtime music. I know that can be kind of hard. Cool. That can be a little difficult too. But yeah, that's
now. Are you
cool,
involved in any type of music, playing instruments?
In a few days, I go into the music studio and record again. I'm working on popular music. That's my own music that I.
That's awesome.
Nice.
Now, do you sing as well?
Oh yeah. Well, I'm taking vocal lessons right now. I'm not a very good singer, but I'm determined to sing. So
hey, there you go.
There you go.
You have a lot of determination. Just the stories that you've told us. I mean, that is very apparent. So I have no doubt that you'll be able to do this. Either.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, if anybody watching this can already tell, Walter's a pretty dang determined person. I mean, I mean, for as much as you kind of petitioned Guinness, and they were just like, okay, fine. Like, okay, all right. You know, but I mean, you just that's what I love about you and reading about your stories and stuff, is that you didn't stop. You kept going. You didn't let, and I'm sure you probably faced a lot of opposition even then, because I mean, you know, I know when we think of esports now, I know esports has significantly evolved over the years since the 80s. I mean, now you have full on arenas. I mean, I want to ask you about that too. What is it like for you to see, being as someone who started the whole esports thing? What's it like now to see just all these people, these younger people, getting at these big arenas and
the Korean Dota circuit,
these sponsorships and these massive amounts of money that they make too doing this kind of stuff. What's that like for you now to see that?
Well, first of all, the video game players that were in that Life magazine photograph that just celebrated its 40th anniversary a week ago, all of those players believed in the future of esports. They wanted to be esports superstars. They were for that era, but they wanted the lifestyle and the opportunity that is present now for the current generation. It's just that they were born like 2 generations too soon.
Yeah.
So they believed in it and they fervently wanted it and they were going to do it and they would have embraced it and it would have been incredible, but they were just way before technology. Because the technology is what made it happen. Because once the technology was there so that any player could play any other player in the world, and also the process of it happening could be monetized by sponsors because you can get your ad in front of a lot of people, and you can also verify how many people are clicking through to your ad, so that when you place an ad in a newspaper, it's hit or miss. You don't know what's going to happen. But you can actually verify and monetize and track the success and the placement of all your ads and all your investment. So therefore, and as the base of people grew larger and larger who were online playing games, it became more and more lucrative and attractive for big sponsors to put money up for contests, for tournaments, and for leagues.
That you're right about that. I mean, the technology has come a long way. Such a long way. I mean, now you have people. We went from going, having to go to a physical location to play arcade games, and now people don't even have to. And I'm more old school in that sense. I love arcades. I've always loved arcades. We have a few arcades by where we live. I know that for a long time there was a big falling out with arcades. As far as there was a lull of them, where they were closing and they weren't as prominent, and now they're kind of on a reemergence now, especially with the barcade scene, especially helping reemerge those and having them come back. And for me, being a competitive player myself, it's always been I grew up in the era of arcades. And it was just, that feeling of slamming a stack of quarters down and like saying I got next and all that. I mean, there was just nothing like that. And, it's somewhat that way now. If you can go to arcade now, there's some places that do that still. But man, it was nothing like that when it was back in the 80s and stuff. And even growing up in the 90s, going to arcades and stuff like that was just crazy. Oh, yeah. And I prefer face to face. Me personally, I prefer being next to my opponent. And things like that, and I miss the crowd. So I bet that was a thing too, man. When you were running Twin Galaxies, then just seeing the crowds of young people around all of these machines. I mean, what was it like for the parents too of these kids, like having these kids come in? I mean, were you involved with any of the parents too, like as far as that whole?
Oh yeah, the parents were. It was a mixed bag. Some parents didn't approve of it, and other parents thought it was okay because they recognized the Twin Galaxies was a clean, safe place, so they didn't have any problem with it.
That's good.
Parents also played the games themselves.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Makes a lot of sense.
What's interesting is today, amongst modern young esporters, they think that video game playing as a spectator sport is brand new. Actually, the spirit of spectator sport has been alive from the very beginning. Yeah. If someone put a quarter in a Donkey Kong machine and they played it at a real high level, a crowd would be around them. If someone played Miss Pac-Man on a high level, a crowd would go around them. People were in love with watching excellence in video game playing. People were hypnotized by excellence in performance. And so if the technology had been available for Billy Mitchell to do his world records on Donkey Kong or Pac-Man way back in 1982, 75,000 arcades would have signed up and there would have been a crowd watching in each one of them.
Oh, yeah.
Because So love watching video games performed on a highest level is a love that's not new. It's ingrained in the actual historical baseline of video game playing.
Yep.
That's very true.
Yep. I remember, I mean, I wasn't allowed to go to arcades very much, but when I did, my parents were with me or my mom was with me. So, but I remember standing around and watching, like the older kids play and, and stuff. And it was, yeah, I mean, that's always been that way.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I didn't really get into playing arcade machines until, I first played Galaga when my mom took me to a laundromat, and they had some arcade machines there, and Galaga was one of the first arcade games I ever played.
Yeah.
And I still love that game to this day. I mean, and that's the thing about video games too, Walter, is, they kind of transcend multi-generational too. I mean, it's, you said that you guys had parents taking their kids and the parents were playing the games too. And that's something I still love seeing to this day. Like when I go to an arcade,
I love that.
Is seeing these parents bringing their kids to experience, and arcades are not going anywhere. I mean, that's something that's going to be timeless. I don't think that even with, and as advanced as our technology is now, they're still around.
Yeah.
I mean, going to play an arcade cabinet is such
so much fun.
Amazing aesthetic too. On top of that. Now I want to talk about some of your other work too. You have the trading card. Let's talk about your trading cards.
I love this.
I was going to ask about that too. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you get started with the video game trading cards? When did that take off?
Oh, it was just some deep inner desire that popped up that I just had to run with. I'm just so intrigued by it. I tried to do trading cards back in 1983, but it just was not possible because the expense level was too high.
Mm-hmm.
And then I tried to do it again in '85, and the expense level was too high. So it was a dormant desire that was real. And in 2011, I had the money to pull it off, so I did it. So I made a set of 200 cards. And I loved it so much, I thought, we can't stop. We've got to keep going. So, do you guys have a logo?
We do.
We can do a trading card on your group.
Oh, that would be great. We would love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We would love a trading card for the next level. That'd be cool. That'd be really cool. Because we do a lot of gaming discussion here too.
What do you call your broadcast?
It's called The Next Level.
Okay.
And I'll send you a logo. I'll do that. I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you.
Trading card. See, here's the thing. I respect what you're doing because you may not have thought of it this way, but you guys are essentially doing oral history. And oral history is important because tons and tons and tons of nuances and hidden sides to history would be lost and forgotten, never recognized and never uncovered if it wasn't for the many people doing oral history.
Thank you.
We appreciate
I really
that.
like that
perspective
on that.
That's a really great take on it.
You realize or not, you guys are historians who are documenting the culture, the popular culture of our times. And everything you do, I hope, gets preserved so that it's passed on because it'll be meaning something to someone in the future when they meticulously go over and index all your shows and find little glimmers of gleaning important gems of history that hadn't been captured by anybody else.
Right.
So hopefully you guys are historians, and I take my hat off to you because it's a very noble cause that benefits future generations.
Well, we appreciate that, Walter. We thank you for that. I mean, I am all about I love history anyway, like in general. I talk about it a lot. But for me, video game history is something that's very important to preserve. And we've talked about this on not just this show, but we've talked about this on the other show we did too, the Dragon Cast. And for me, it's I know they have like the video game history museum, and there's the foundation and things like that. And I think preservation is super important, especially for current and future generations. We've mentioned about like I don't know how familiar you are with video game consoles, but backwards compatibility, how that's super important, and things like that, so that people can still experience games in their truest form, as we did when we were younger. So I think that's why it's important for the arcades to always be accessible or be available, and so that we can pass those on to the future, and that way they can remain timeless like they should. And you're absolutely right, and I appreciate that, Walter, very much. We thank you so much for saying that and referencing us that way. That means a lot to us here.
In the course of doing Twin Galaxies and all these other projects, the practice that I do in my life every day that kept me clear and having a high energy level and keeping the intelligence hopefully as clear and as sharp as possible is because I practice transcendental meditation.
Yes.
Which is simply unbelievable. You sit down in a comfortable chair twice a day.
Yep.
You close your eyes, and for 20 minutes in the morning, then later 20 minutes in the late after your day's activities are over, you do this mental technique. It turns out to be more than a mental technique. It actually affects your physiology and your brain structure and your heart and cardiovascular in a major, completely positive, healthifying way. And so I have to say that I talk about this all the time because I'm so impressed with the results and how it's kept me young and youthful and strong and clear and happy and blah, blah, blah. It's even improved the blah, blah, blahs of life.
Yeah, and I know you've been practicing that for quite a while. I know that last time we spoke, when we met in 2019, you had said that you actually traveled to India. You try to go at least twice a year, is what I recall. How long have you been practicing the transcendental meditation?
52 years. No, 52.
Oh, that's amazing.
Here's the thing. I was part of the drug culture of the 60s. I was what they called a hippie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hair and a beard, and also big muscles. I used to bench press 310 pounds.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
So I used to be strong and young and long-haired and bearded and take drugs. And it really, really hurt me. LSD and marijuana really, really was bad for me. It is actually for everybody. It just doesn't do right for the nervous system and mind at all. And I was left with depression and anxiety, couldn't sleep right, couldn't digest right, had back pain, feet pain, all these things were going wrong. And I met someone who said, I had the same problems, and I learned transcendental meditation, and all those problems went away. And so I got excited, went and learned it. Sure enough, within a couple of months, all the depression, the anxiety, the back pain, the foot pain, the sleepless nights, the indigestion problems, the headaches, eye aches, all that stuff went away because transcendental meditation triggers off what they call a hypometabolic state of restful alertness in the body and mind, which is a unique fourth state of consciousness, different than anything you're experiencing every day right now. And when you're in that state, the alpha waves are increasing and all sorts of other incredible cardiovascular things happen. And you essentially throw out the deepest stresses in your physiology and your brain, and happiness and normalcy dawns again.
Wow.
Now, what would you suggest to someone who is interested in learning more or starting transcendental meditation for themselves?
Good question. So you go online to a website called tm.org, and there's a big button that says, find me a local TM teacher. You click on it, and they'll send you by email the address and phone number of your local TM teacher, because there's a TM teacher in just about every area of the United States. And I'll tell you, it transforms your life. I mean, I'm 73 now, but I don't conduct myself like a 73-year-old because transcendental meditation keeps me young and healthy and happy. That's
amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, before we started, when we couldn't see you on video, I was surprised, like, honestly, in your voice, you just sounded so energetic and spry, and just, I know that probably sounds really bad, but no, it definitely works.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something I wanted to mention, because I know that was one very unique aspect of when I first found out about you was in the King of Khan documentary. You mentioned that, and you actually, there's a part in that where you're what shows you practicing that, I believe, in that documentary. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that. And I just find that to be very interesting that works for you. And I'm a firm believer in whatever works for you. Do it. You know what I mean? As long as it's good, healthy, a good, healthy thing, of course.
Yeah. Well, in the case of TM, it's not a theory,
Right.
it's not a philosophy. It's actually something you do.
Yeah.
And no matter what you believe in the world of philosophy, or what you believe in the world of religion, or anything else that's a belief, it doesn't matter. It functionally, mechanically works the same for each person, and rejuvenates the physiology in the mind, and just puts life back on track. Happiness, high energy level, your creativity soars, your intelligence gets sharp again, and all the things that dull life and make it a burden go away.
That's what I need.
I know I could definitely use a lot of that myself.
You'll be very impressed, and it is near you. It is. There's a center in Louisville. There's a center in Bloomington, Indiana, which is probably 3 hours away.
Yeah, I think
about
that's about 2.5 hours from us.
Mhm.
Louisville is definitely closer.
Yeah,
Okay. There's a center in Louisville.
that's fantastic.
I'm
Wow,
looking at that.
you're looking at that now,
I
aren't you?
absolutely
Yeah,
am,
you
because
should.
that was actually, I know video game stuff, but that was actually the biggest takeaway from when I met you back then. So I'm glad that you brought it up, because I was going to ask you about it anyway. So
Good.
That's amazing. So you're working on music. Do you have any other, before we go ahead and before we close the episode here, you have any other projects you're working on outside of music, or are you just are you still kind of just strictly doing music at the moment? Have you done anything else lately in the video game space?
I still go to events. Like I'm going to the Free Play Florida in Orlando in a couple of days, and I'll be
Oh, nice.
there for a few days. And I've been to Gen Con only once. I've been to Dragon Con only once. I commonly go to the Pinball Expo in Chicago. So the main two things I'm doing is trading cards. I've designed almost 5,000 trading cards.
Oh,
And
Wow.
And our archivist has about 3,600 of them in his
Oh,
collection.
wow.
So essentially, not quite 4,000 are in print yet. Maybe about 3,750 are in print so far. So
Wow.
it's a lot of trading cards.
wow.
that's so awesome. I love that.
Man, that's amazing. Yeah,
And music and it's the trading cards. And
that's
meditation.
amazing.
Those are my three loves.
That's awesome.
I love it.
That's awesome.
That's great.
Well, Walter, thank you so much for taking the time to be on our show, The Next Level, and thank all of you for watching our show. If you're watching this on YouTube, let me know in the comments below if you've ever met Walter, and share with us the experiences you had meeting him. He's such a fantastic human being,
That's very kind.
and very
If anybody's interested in seeing all the trading cards, they
I
can
am.
go to the website. The website's called thewalterdaycollection.com.
I was on there earlier.
yeah. Yeah, we were checking that out earlier. Yeah.
And there's thousands of the cards already posted on there, and a couple thousand that aren't even posted yet because it's slow to post them. We haven't got around to it.
That's amazing. Well, we hope to have our own trading card. That'd be great, man. We would love that. And
You have to for the backside of your card, you have to write the biography or the story of your group, your company, your podcast. And it has to be
Absolutely.
150 to 200 words. So that's it. 150 to 200 words, and then the graphic for the front. And we'll do a card.
that sounds great.
Great.
That sounds great. We'll absolutely do that. Well, Walter, thank you so much again. We'll leave those links in the description below, so you can go check out Walter Day, the WalterDayCollection.com. And on that website, you can also learn all kinds of more information about Walter Day, his projects and things like that. There's just tons of articles. There's a gallery. There is, award ceremonies I'm looking at, things like that here as well. And also, if you want to book him for an appearance as well, you can go to that website also. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching us here on YouTube, or if you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and many other podcast platforms. We do appreciate you for doing just that. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you on the next one. Thank you, guys.